What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Colby Covington, 16 wins and 3 losses, taking on Jorge Masvidal, 35 wins and 15 losses. This is taking place at UFC 272. One quick interesting thing to look at, and this kind of speaks to the reign of Kamaru Usman in this division. He's beaten both of these guys twice. Just something to think about. Yes, both of those fights against Colby Covington were super competitive. The first and the second, both very competitive. Especially, the first fight was great between the two. The second fight was a very good fight that was razor close, where it was kind of anybody's guess going into the scorecards who was going to come out on top there. But yeah, Kamaru Usman now has like 5 title defenses after winning the belt against Woodley, defending against Colby Covington, Masvidal, Gilbert Burns, Masvidal again, then Covington again. That's pretty dominant. But yeah, now we finally have the grudge match between Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. Longtime former, sparring partners, teammates, and so forth. Just a lot of bad blood in that relationship. But, this is a very just highly impactful, or at least, 2 big names in the division who seem to want to have nothing but top tier, if not title fights, then, the big money fights. Covington is 34 years old now. Jorge Masvidal is 37 years old. And, one gripe that I had with Covington getting a second shot at the title is that, while you had Kamaru Usman basically beating the Gilbert Burns and then fighting Masvidal twice, and you've had a situation at 170, this was both true in the Woodley era and now in the Kamaru Usman era, where you had the other top-ish tiered contenders just waiting for a shot at the title as opposed to fighting each other. Like, for instance, you had Colby Covington before that first shot against Kamaru Usman. The best guys that he had beaten, and this was 3 fights in a row in succession, his last 3 wins were Demian Maia, RDA, Rafael Dos Anjos, and then Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler hasn't been ranked in the top 10 for the past couple years now. And so you had Colby Covington, who didn't fight Ben Askren when he was new to the UFC, who didn't fight Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Leon Edwards. Darren Till was a top-ish contender at the time. Gilbert Burns, and, so you had Covington and Masvidal basically not fighting the other elite guys at 170, and were still able to get multiple cracks at the title. In boxing, we're dealing with the same thing in this Canelo Alvarez era, where he's the guy who's beating all of the different champions, where you've got the other belt holders basically waiting to try to keep their ticket, that belt, to keep that so hopefully they could be a part of this, Canelo Alvarez sweepstakes. But nonetheless, you've got 2 super high quality fighters here in Covington versus Masvidal. A couple years ago, I would have given Masvidal a greater shot at winning this one. Where he had broken off the wins, the knockout win over Darren Till, the knockout win over Ben Askren, one of the most exciting first few seconds of any UFC fight you'll ever see. And then obviously the BMF showdown between Masvidal and Nate Diaz. Masvidal was peaking at that time. But before that, it's almost like we have short memories, where after Masvidal stopped Donald Cowboy Cerrone, this is all the way back in January of 2017, he then had back-to-back fights against Demian Maia and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Lost both of those fights via decision, even though they were 2 very different styles of opponents. Masvidal looked like he had kind of hit his ceiling, to where it's like if you go against the best jiu-jitsu practitioner specialist in Demian Maia, you're going to come up short, because how are you going to keep this submission virus off of your back? So Masvidal had, trouble keeping the fight at, striking range. And then Stephen Wonderboy Thompson kind of fighting his style of fight and beating Masvidal in that way. And then it was after that Masvidal went on that 3-fight run that just, grew his fame extraordinarily. On the Covington side, as I mentioned, you had those 3 fights, the 3 wins over Demian Maia, RDA, and then Robbie Lawler, going into his first title fight with Usman, which ended up being a excellent title bout. And going into the 5th round, it was anybody's guess who was winning that fight. I mean, you had scorecards ranging from 3-1 Usman to 2-2 to 3-1 Covington, going into the 5th. It was an excellent fight. And Usman ended up stopping Covington in that 5th round. Since that, the only fight that Covington had between those shots at the title was a TKO win over Tyron Woodley in a fight that Covington dominated. But this was like the third of 4 or 5 fights where, third of 4 of Woodley's final UFC fights where he was just getting dominated. It was when Woodley lost the title versus Kamaru Usman, and then when he lost to Gilbert Burns, and then he lost to Colby Covington. So Colby Covington, I feel, beat a pretty diminished Tyron Woodley. And then he had the second crack at the title where, again, it was 5 pretty even rounds, and then Usman was awarded the unanimous decision win. So now we've got Covington versus Masvidal. And as I said, I would have given Masvidal a greater chance in 2019. But, again, Masvidal's 37 years old. Covington, I don't think he's going to play the same stand-up game that he has now played with Kamaru Usman twice. Famously, just boxing, you had 2 wrestlers boxing in their first fight. And then they had a lot of the second fight in the stand-up as well. I just still think that Masvidal is a different ball of wax. Even after getting knocked out cold in Masvidal's second title challenge against Kamaru Usman, where Usman was said to be the wrestler, Masvidal is supposed to be the striker. So the idea was, is Kamaru going to try to keep taking Masvidal down like he did in their first fight, which was Masvidal's very last fight. Masvidal's 2 most recent fights were both those title challenges against Kamaru Usman. The first one was on short notice. The second one, he had a full camp and then got knocked out in the second round where, that knockout punch wasn't the first time Masvidal got lit up by Usman in that fight. Usman's, threat of the takedown and jab were both, setting up a lot of nice right hands that were catching Masvidal before the knockout. But with all that said, I still don't think that Covington is going to want to, as much success as he had over the course of 2 fights against Usman in the stand-up, I don't think he's going to play that same game with Masvidal. I think that he's going to try to drain him in a different way. He might do some striking in the first round. I think the first round is going to be very interesting to watch because I really think that the first and second round are going to be Masvidal's chances to win this fight. I don't see Masvidal beating Covington in a 5-round decision at 37 years old. I think that he's going to have to drop and hurt Covington probably in the first couple of rounds. Otherwise, that's probably an indication that this fight is going Covington's way. Either that Covington is more competitive with Masvidal in the stand-up than we might have thought, or Covington is securing those kind of takedowns or, just kind of clinch work, half takedowns to where he's kind of bullying Masvidal, being the slightly bigger fighter and more experienced and better technical wrestler. One of those 2 cases is what's going to bring this fight into the 3rd round. Covington's not, great with the submissions. He's more so bullying you in some of these, either in the stand-up or in the clinch kind of half takedown work where he's, just grabbing your arm, bringing you back to your shoulder, and just kind of making you have to fight his position battles. So if this fight is going into the 3rd round, I think that we're going to have a greatly reduced Masvidal energy-wise to where it should be Covington's fight from the 3rd round on. I'm taking Covington via decision here. Probably 4 rounds to 1, maybe 3 rounds to 2. I wouldn't be totally surprised if it ends up, 5 rounds to 0 on some scorecards. Again, Masvidal is a very dynamic striker. And even though, again, he was knocked out cold by Kamaru Usman by a straight right hand, I still think that Masvidal's potential for putting somebody's lights out is going to be very high in this Covington fight. I just think that it's more likely that Covington does fight him competitively in the moments that they are in the stand-up, and then he's going to find his opportunities to transition that stand-up game into that clinch work and perhaps takedown game to where, if nothing else, you should be banking around and draining Masvidal's gas tank. I think that that's what we're going to see at play in Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Should the winner of this fight get a title shot? We kind of have the queue now at 170 sort of started backing up to where you could argue that Burns is deserving of a rematch at the title. Leon Edwards, obviously, Vicente Luque, Bilal Muhammad. We've got some players now, some, a little bit of fresh blood in the division, because for a while we only had, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who was always knocking out at the door. He had, challenged Woodley twice for the title. And then we have, the old guard, RDA, Robbie Lawler, different fighters like that. But now we've got some new contenders. So it's going to be interesting to see how Usman continues his title reign and how long he stays at welterweight before trying something at middleweight, where his boy and fellow Nigerian ancestry-wise, Israel Adesanya. I don't expect them two to battle it out. I think it's more likely that if Adesanya goes up and tries light heavyweight again, then we might see Usman trying his lot at middleweight. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.